Hello, class. I thought it would be good if we could do a little bit of a science lesson as we did for history. I'm going to probably cover like I did in history today and Monday. So today's Friday's lesson and Monday, and just combine it together. So you'll have till Monday to do all of this. So you could read it all today if you want to, and play this video, watch it, or you can watch it over the weekend. And so let's review as we start. Remember the flower? We're just going to review a little bit of the parts of the flower. Remember, we know what the pretty part here is called, the petals. And what's the job of the petals? Attracts the pollinators, whether it be bees or butterflies or birds. Then we have the stamen. This is the stamen. The stamen holds the pollen. See the pollen at the top? So for each of these, you need to know what they are and to be able to label them and tell the job that they do. How about this? Yes, that is the pistil. The pistil makes the seeds. And then this part here is called the sepal. And the sepal protects the bud. So petal attracts pollinators, stamen holds the pollen, pistil makes the seeds, and sepal protects the bud. We also talked about different kinds of flowers. This is a composite flower. A composite flower is a flower made up of many flowers. There are two parts of this composite flower. This is the example of the daisy, a great example because it has all of these many little, see, a whole bunch of those make up this center part known as the what? That's right, disc flowers. And then these flowers coming off the disc are called what? That's right. Did you say ray flowers? Yes, the ray flowers. Think of the rays of a sun. Think of a round disc. And then know what all of these flowers are called in your book on these next few pages, see? And all of the flowers and what they're called. And all of these that you did, your activity book sheets that have these, you may study. And so we read to there, and that takes us to here. We had read this as well. So we'll start on page 61. What are the parts of the seed? Well, we have these two parts called, there's two cotyledons. Say cotyledon. Cotyledon. And inside the cotyledons, we have the stored food. And then on the very outside of the seed, we have the seed coat. And the seed coat is protecting the seed before the plant is able to germinate and to grow. Actually peel this off on a lima bean or butter bean that you see here. Inside is the embryo, and the embryo is the what? Yes, the young plant that sprouts as it germinates. So you also want to know the parts of the seed, the two cotyledons, the seed coat on the outside, and the young plant, which is called the embryo. Last time we mentioned the next bird. That is called a what? A cardinal. The male is the bright red. The female is a reddish brown, so that she can protect her babies and blend in and camouflage better. Whereas the male is brightly colored to attract the female. Today we're talking about seeds, how seeds travel. Seeds travel in a number of ways. There are airborne seeds that you should read. Read all about that. And every time there's a picture with a number, you need to know what that is. Oh, that's a poppy and what it looks like. There are airborne seeds where there's seeds that are as fine as dust and they just pop open into the air, and they're small and they can travel and they're moved by wind. Wind is another way, which is almost the same, but other airborne seeds move in the wind as well, but there may be a breeze involved. Sometimes there doesn't even need to be a breeze for some airborne seeds, but then there's wind involved, and then even more kinds of seeds would travel that way. Here's a good example there. You've probably taken the dandelion and blown on the dandelion, and then these tiny little seeds float away. Okay. But also milkweed and thistle do something very similar too. Look at that. Did you realize that inside the pine cone, the little seeds are in there? See, and they fly out. The wind moves them out, and they flutter around, and then they decide to grow wherever they land. Maple seeds, we talked about the little helicopter shape and the keys. So remember about those. All of these and how they travel. Even the notorious, should I say the word notorious? Should I say the popular tumbleweed that you see either in cartoons or movies or books like this, that are just tumbling and floating across the road? As they tumble, they are spreading seeds, and they're tumbling about, and they are spreading the seeds so that they can grow in other places. And that is God's way of spreading the seed. With that plant, water. We talked about water before. I even mentioned it in the other lesson. The seeds can float in the water. They can go downstream. They can catch on to something else, and they can decide to grow right on the edge of a stream or river, or they can, not stop there and go somewhere else, hitch a ride somewhere else. But see the seed there, and then it floats. Maybe the branch falls off and floats, and the seed's on there. And look, it'll start to root. Right? Different kinds of plants. So what I find really interesting about the coconut falls into the ocean and floats to islands or other shores where they grow into coconut palm trees. Did you ever think about that a coconut that grew on one island, the whole coconut might float in the water and end up washing on shore on another island, and the coconut grew there? That was interesting to read about, don't you think? Hey, tell me, send me a message if you think that you liked that, because I liked it. All right. How about animals and people? We've probably heard this before. I mentioned this the other day, that here's the squirrel. Maybe a little burr gets caught on the squirrel, and then he scratches himself, or his tail does something, and it falls off somewhere else, and then the plant can grow in another place. This is so important because all these different ways, these burrs and these cockleburs and even ticks and critters like that, they hitch rides too. And there's something called a beggar's tick. They're hitchhiking seeds. Reminds me of a tick that rides on people that's an arachnid. But anyway, all different ways so that the plants aren't all trying to grow and compete for the same land, that they can spread around and travel other places. Other animals, not just squirrels, but many other animals. That happens. It happens with dogs and cats too. So other special methods. Some plants are designed to scatter their own seeds. When the fruit of a jewelweed ripens, it explodes, shooting its seeds into all directions. Wisteria and other members of the pea family produce seeds in pods. When the pods dry out, they split and the seeds are scattered. When the squirting cucumber is ripe, it drops from its stalks, leaving a hole in the end of the fruit. The seeds are shot out of this hole. Some seeds are shot as much as 15 feet away from the plant. It's a long way for one plant anyway. So why are seeds designed to travel away from the parent plant? Because if they didn't, what would happen? Did you say they'd all try to grow in the same place, and that wouldn't be good? And they'd use up all the nutrients in the soil in the one place. Number 2 on page 63. List 3 things which carry seeds away from the parent plant. You could have said wind. Did you say wind? You could say water. You could also say animals, people, animals and people, and maybe some other ways. Those are the main ways. What is unique about the way in which each of the following plant scatters its seeds? A tumbleweed, what's unique about that? Yeah, it rolls across the road, or rolls across the land, or rolls across the prairies. Very unusual, but unique. How about the jewelweed? Yeah, when they're slightly touched, what happens? They burst. Boom, they burst and explode and scatter the seed. How about the dandelion? Yeah, each of those little downy-like seeds floats and scatters and floats away in the breeze. How about the flax? Did you read about that? I didn't say anything about this one, but did you read about it? What do you think? Well, they have a sticky substance that allows them to hitch a ride on a passing animal. They're hitchhikers, and their seeds are scattered that way. We're going to go on and talk about germination. Now, as I said the other day, I said this on Thursday, germination, someone asked what germination was. I think it was someone in row 3. Who is it? Someone in row 3 asked me that question. I remember what germination, it was a good question, but it basically means when a plant sprouts. See, a seed could be dormant for quite a while. And then when it germinates, it gets wet, it soaks in the water. And then depending on the plant, the seed sprouts and it's no longer dormant anymore. Like something is dormant means it's acts like it's dead, but it's not doing anything. It acts like it's not alive, but it is. Like through the winter, trees are dormant. They're not growing. But then when spring comes, it's like they come back to life. Well, they weren't really dead. They were just dormant. And you have the term dormant here. Germinate means it sprouts. The seed germinates, it sprouts. And at that point, it begins to change. If you turn the page onto page 64, you will see that seeds need water. Now we know that. Of course, they need water in order to grow. So important, especially at the beginning, that they need water. So you're going to look at all these things that things need in order to germinate or to grow and to sprout. They need water. Except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone, but if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. In other words, it's talking about like the seed coat falls off, doesn't need it anymore. And there's a spiritual application here that the death of the seed coat is a picture of Jesus who gave himself for us. Just as the grain of wheat brings forth new life, so Jesus' death and resurrection bring new life to those of us who trust in the Savior. See, we die to the old life and Jesus can give us that new life. So the seed coat falls off and new life comes to that seed that seemed dead, but now is alive. Seeds need water, but seeds also need oxygen. A plant cannot grow without oxygen. It needs air. Oxygen, the actual gas in the air that it needs to grow, to germinate, okay? Oxygen, okay? And then it needs that oxygen in order to use that stored food that is in the seed. Seeds need the right temperature. They need the right temperature. You know, if it's not the right temperature, the seed won't grow either. It needs to be the right temperature. If it's too cold, it won't. If it's too hot, it won't. You know, you don't want it burning. It needs to be the right temperature. And depending on the seed, they germinate at different temperatures. So for example, a cold weather crop like broccoli, it's going to germinate and grow better at a cooler temperature. Whereas if you're taking cotton or that kind of thing, it's going to want something warmer. So what do seeds need in order to germinate? They need water, they need oxygen, and they need the right temperature. Can you remember those three things? Three things that all seeds need in order to germinate. That's a good question. They need water, they need oxygen, and they need the right temperature is what seeds need. And then as they begin to grow, you will see something called a primary root. The primary root is that main root that grows down into the soil. In fact, that's the first thing typically that grows in a new plant is the root will grow first. And then from the root comes the stalk up here and later on leaves. The root pushes its way into the soil, okay? And we have the primary root. Then there's these smaller roots that will grow off of it from the main root or primary root. For example, look at this corn. There's a picture of corn and it's starting to germinate. And look, a little bit goes down, a little bit further goes down, a little further goes down, a little further. And then there's some offshoots that grow. And you're just now seeing the stalks growing. But see, the root part grew first, didn't it? Then the stalk above the stem grows from that. They break through the soil. And as they continue to grow, the seed perfectly is designed to send its leaves upward into the sun. And then the sun gives it the energy that it needs from the sun. And then the whole process of photosynthesis occurs. Oh, but it started down in the soil first to get nutrients there to grow. And then they draw up water and minerals from the soil. And then they begin to make their own food at that point, once they come above. And photosynthesis, the process by which plants can make their own food, really important to know. They're all part of God's plan to produce plants needed for people and animals. We depend on plants so much for our food, for medicine, for clothing, for shelter, for good things. And God's promise in his word in Genesis 8:22 says that we have God's promise. It says this, while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest shall not cease. Aren't you glad for that promise? Seed time and harvest shall not cease. So what is dormant? What is dormant? Did you say when a seed is, it's alive, but it's not growing? It's alive, but it's not growing. It's dormant. What about germinate? Germinate means, da, da, da. It means to sprout or sprouting. Okay. What things must a seed have in order to germinate? What things must a seed have in order to germinate? There are 3 things that we talked about. A seed needs, number 1, water. Number 2, oxygen. And number 3, the right temperature. Can you say it without looking? A seed needs what 3 things in order to germinate? It needs water, it needs oxygen, and it needs the right temperature. And then another question, what part of the seed dies when the seed germinates? What part falls off and dies? That's right. Did you say seed coat? The seed coat. And the second part of the question, number 3 here. Why? Why? Why does it fall off and die? Because its job is finished. It's done. It doesn't need the seed coat anymore to protect it. In fact, we want the water to be able to get in even more. And number 4, what is the first root which the plant sends out called? The first root that it sends out, and then later other ones come off of it. The first root is called what? Did you say primary root? If so, you are correct. Give yourself a pat on the back. Super job. Here's something you can do. Look, you see this Ziploc bag? And look, you can take like a water bottle and cut it down. That's what that is. And then you could take the paper towel and you could put a seed in there, and the paper towel is wet. So it's going to stay wet. And it's not going to be able to evaporate much because the Ziploc bag is sealed. And what's going to happen is you read this, but it's going to be able to germinate in this bag. And it's going to be able to germinate more quickly than even if you put it in the soil, because it's going to, what happens a lot of times is you'll water a plant, but then it will quickly evaporate depending on the conditions. In this bag, it's going to retain that moisture even more, and which will make it germinate a lot faster. In fact, that's what they say to do in your garden. Oftentimes, depending on the plant, is you can soak them overnight, or you can even put them in a bag and get them starting to germinate and then put them in the soil, and your plant will sprout a lot faster, depending on the type of seed. Some things it won't matter, but for some things that take longer to germinate, some plants, this may be a good idea to actually use when planting your own plants. So something to do. Well, I hope you learned something today, and you take care. You learn all you can. You give 100%, even though we're not together right now. And remember, learn something new every day. Bye for now.